So a subscriber caught me lying to you. As you know, I'm a big advocate of these modern EPA approved wood stoves. This one's a few years old and it's 85% efficient. It's already obsolete. The newer ones I think are now 90, 95%. Eventually they'll be 100%. And there's really no smoke that comes out of it, the chimney. It has these air tubes here. And what those air tubes do is burn the smoke. So when you put the vent in, it lowers the flame of the burn, but that's where all your smoke starts to come out of the wood. Well, then that smoke hits these air tubes and ignites into a blue flame. It's beautiful to watch. It works much like a candle. If you ever blew out a candle and then tried to light smoke, you'll see it just kind of poof, lights right up. Works in that similar idea. You can actually use this technology on a generator. If you have smoke coming out of a pipe somehow or another and you put it up to the air filter on your generator, it will use that smoke and the spark will light that smoke. And instead of using gasoline, this helps us keep the amount of firewood that we have to use down to a very low level. We're using less than a cord a year. And the size of the sticks are just tiny. As a matter of fact, here's an idea. I put 3 layers of firewood in there. 2 of the layers use firewood this big. I put 2 this side and this side here going north and south. And then I may put a piece like this in going east and west. And then I put 2 more pieces on top of that, north and south. So I have 15 cords of firewood out there. That should last 15 years. The key to this working though is you got to test your firewood to make sure the moisture level is down on it. It's got to be 20% or less. So what you do is you split your firewood before you use it. Every piece that comes in this house I test. So I split it, test it to make sure it's 20% or less, and then bring it in. Oak and hickory, which is what we have out there primarily, take forever to dry. So I test it because some of it's still above, about 22%, and I just don't want to bring it in here. It causes creosote, smoke, the reburners don't work as well. But I am a big advocate of this, and follow the instructions and you will have a very happy life using this. But I see YouTubers, other YouTubers out there using these kind of wood stoves, and their window is just full of tar. You can just see the tar all over it. You might be able to see that this is a little bit stained, but that is not tar. I can wipe that, open it up, wipe it off with my finger. It's just a dust. Most likely what happened was when the fire started to die down, it produced a little bit of smoke, and the air burners pushed the smoke down before it could re-burn, and it stained the window. But that wipes right off. But that tar that you see is wet firewood. I mean, I even asked a YouTuber one time in a live chat, do you test your firewood? He said, nah, I know what that is. I let it sit out there for 6 months. Well, first thing he's burning is pine, and pine has got a lot of moisture in it, that sap. Cedar and pine, they're evergreens, and you're not supposed to burn evergreen in this. Now, I know the people in the Northwest, that's all we can burn, and you're gonna have a problem with creosote. Your chimney's gonna have to be cleaned all the time. I don't have to clean this but once a year, and last year when we cleaned it, there was nothing in it. I mean, nothing. It was just spotless. Is it a little bit more effort? Yes, because you got to dry the firewood. I know that in this area, when it gets cold, like negative temperatures, all of a sudden you hear all the chainsaws starting everywhere. It's because they weren't prepared. So they're burning wet wood. Green wood is the best way to put it. You're just not prepared if you're doing it on the day that you need it. But we got it stacked out there. Some of it's coming up on 2.5, 3 years old. The EPA is really frowning on inefficient wood stoves. So if you're making your own or you're using an old one, municipalities are banning them, states are banning them. So I was asked today a pretty cool question, and I had to change my thinking. And I had to understand why I would want to change my thinking before I answered it. Because I was going to say, no, you don't want to do that. You want one of these. These are the greatest thing in the world. The question was, can I burn deadfall in an efficient wood stove? Is it dry enough? Well, you would think that a tree has fallen down, it's been on the ground for a few years, that it would be fairly dry. But there's two things with that. One, if it's laying right on the ground, it's soaking up all that water off the ground. And that is how a tree decomposes. Bugs get into it. That's why when you stack firewood, you want to stack it off the ground so it's not soaking up that water. So no, you don't want to use deadfall in these. The second reason you don't want to use deadfall is, let's say it didn't fall on the ground. It fell on 2 blocks of wood and it's off the ground, it's perfect. Deadfall takes forever to dry. You have to really split the wood in order for it to dry appropriately. And you need to get it in a north-south airflow. Also, the other reason is if the limb is covered completely in bark and you don't have half of it trimmed up like this one here. So I have half of this one in bark and half of it split. If it's covered in bark completely, it will take forever for it to dry. In a situation where you don't have a chainsaw, you don't feel like you can run a chainsaw, can you run firewood in this? And so she asked, what about a Franklin wood stove? And I had to rethink my thinking here. I had a heat exchanger that I built for the camper, and I'm going to show you some footage on this. So I almost feel like I'm getting ready to do a series of videos. In yesterday's video, as well as the day before, I've been discussing our outdoor wood furnace, also called a heat exchanger, outdoor heat exchanger for winter heating. We actually have a fire in it today. It's kind of dying down right now. The wood was really wet. I haven't dried it out. So the idea of it is the blocks create an insulation. And so I'm insulating the entire outside, except for the front, of course, and capturing that heat. And so then I will run, it's not finished. Right now, I have to put a piece of metal for the chimney. That's the chimney output right there. It's upside down, but that goes on top of the stove here. Then I'll put the metal, and then I'll run a chimney up, and then I'll put another layer of bricks around the metal to hold that heat in. And then right here, I will have a piece of ductwork right here where the thermometer and the meat tongs are. That is where the ventilation will go. Right now, as it stands, this is at 200 degrees. And so the heat comes out of here and will enter into the camper, who won't use any type of blower to blow the heat around. It will work automatically. You don't need electric for this system. I was really proud of that. Had it been inside the camper, I wouldn't have needed to use near as much firewood, but I used 8 cords of firewood in that. And I ran green firewood. What it was is we got here on the property in March. I think I said in that video that I built it maybe in May. I had to have it ready for October. Well, I also had to have firewood ready in October. There was just no way that I could make that work. So I had to burn wet wood. Oh, the smoke would just plume out of that thing non-stop. And it was very inefficient because it was outside. Because a lot of your heat was just being lost right out the front of the wood stove. But if you could have captured all that heat inside your house, you would have been more efficient. Because the heat would at least been inside the house. Now, a lot of that heat goes straight up the chimney. That doesn't happen with these too terribly bad because it has a ceiling in here. These things are really nice. It has a ceiling, it has all this soapstone in it, and so that soaks up all that heat before the heat goes out the chimney. Ben Franklin was actually trying to figure out how to keep the heat inside the wood stove, and he never figured it out, but it was better than nothing, those Franklins. The other concern I have with a Franklin is inside the house is carbon monoxide. It can release some carbon monoxide. So if you're going to use one of those in your house, make sure you have a carbon monoxide detector. The other question was the deadfall. Now in a Franklin, a deadfall isn't a terrible idea. You could clean up your yard, you could use it. It's going to be harder to burn. The thing you have to remember about wet wood is you're going to lose, I think, don't quote me, I'm going to say 70%. It might not be that high, but you're going to lose about 70% of your heat because the fire is trying to burn that water. Water puts out fire. So you're trying to heat that up, that water, and you're steaming it off, and it's going to cause creosote. It is going to cause a fire in your chimney at some point. But the creosote can light off, I think, at 500 degrees. So all it takes is a spark to come up and hit that creosote, and it's a tar. The first year we were here, in this house, was the same year that we used that Franklin. As a matter of fact, we only used the Franklin until January, then we moved in here. So we still had wet wood that we were burning. And the creosote dripped out of the chimney and onto our roof, and it was just clumps of tar. Just like you go to the hardware store and you buy the roofing tar, it was just that tacky and nasty. So you're gonna have that problem, burning wet wood. But you can do it in a Franklin. Probably the best thing to burn is wet wood. The Franklin is so inefficient. I mean, I understand why the old timers wanted to burn wet wood. It burned slower. It didn't seem like it was all going out the chimney. There was a lot of reasons why they burned wet wood. And back then it made sense. In these, I just completely disagree with anybody who's burning wet wood in these. These things are so nice and so efficient. Carolyn lit it up last night at 11 o'clock. I lit it about 2 p.m. And when I went to bed at 9 o'clock, it was still like 84 degrees in the house. It got pretty toasty in here. It was a little hotter than normal. I told her, well, if you get cold, you can light the stove. And I loaded it up for her. She lit it up. Boy, it was miserably hot in here. Now, we have this little heat-powered fan, and it goes off about 6 hours. And by 6 o'clock, so that was 7 hours, it was still spinning a little bit this morning. What I have determined is this log right here. this one. I know it was this one. There was a tree that fell down in the city park down the ways, and I went down and got it. The trunk was about 4 foot in diameter. You may have seen that video. It was a few years ago. And it was so big that I had to use a chainsaw to split it. So I wasn't using a maul or a split or anything. It's oak, but it's very dense. You can feel how dense it is. So I think there's, I don't know how to explain this. There's more wood in this piece of oak than in this piece of oak. You can feel the difference, because I think what it was is that trunk had to grow very tight and very dense to support its own weight. It was huge. So if you're totally against these things, and I know a lot of people are, they just refuse to buy them. They're going to use their old-time wood stoves. You can use wet firewood. Did I really lie to you? No, I didn't lie to you. In a Franklin, it made sense to run the wet firewood. We didn't really have a choice. In here, it's so hard to burn in this stove. So if you click this up next box, take to a video where I was talking about how to grow sunflower seeds in a jar. So I hope I can inspire you to think outside the box when you're living your dreams. Thanks for watching.